As we approach Super Bowl 59 rapidly, let's take a quick peek at the NFL draft, specifically the top of the NFL draft. What's the buzz at the top? Who are the prospects that are starting to separate themselves from the rest of the group? And of course, where are the quarterbacks going to go? Senior Bowl risers as well on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Love the everydayers. Appreciate you. Hit the thumbs up. Let us know you stopped by. If you are new to the program, welcome. Subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts so you can hang out with us as we break down the NFL, Super Bowl, NFL draft. We got free agency and what is shaping up to be a very interesting trade season, I think, in the NFL, as well as we head toward April and the draft and maybe even some funky offseason shenanigans in the June 1st realm of things as we get ready for the 2025 season. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right. So this week, the biggest stories around the NFL, Super Bowl aside, Matt, have been the Myles Garrett requesting a trade and then Cooper Kupp coming out and saying that, yeah, I would like to stay, but they're going to trade me. So I'm going to go somewhere else. One of those situations is going to garner a lot of picks for one team. I think the Rams aren't going to get a lot for Cooper Kupp, and who knows, maybe they're just trying to see if they can get anything and maybe end up releasing Cooper Kupp, because that's a possibility as well. When you have a veteran player who you're clearly trying to trade, usually that means you're not going to get a lot of value for him. And in the end, maybe it's not even worth it. And players like that end up getting cut and a new team starts with a new contract situation for said player. We'll see how those things go. We've already talked about both of those trade scenarios, but I think there's also some opportunity for some trades at the top of the NFL draft, Matt. And if we're talking NFL draft, let's start with the number one pick, and is the Tennessee Titans, who own the number one pick in the draft. And I find it curious that at Senior Bowl week, when everybody gets together and you've got media and you've got teams and you've got GMs and everyone kind of rubbing elbows, and what sort of stories come out of that situation. And I found it fascinating that the stories that came out of it were the Tennessee Titans doing a lot of work on the quarterbacks, right? Tennessee head coach has high praise for Sanders at the Senior Bowl, compares him to Joe Burrow. The building sentiment from scouts and execs at the Senior Bowl is that Miami quarterback Cam Ward is going to be the top pick in the NFL draft. And you start to put these things together, and guess what season it also is? It's draft season, it's trade season. It's also the beginning of lying season. Welcome to lying season, everybody, right? And so I see all this, and I see the Browns with the number 2 pick and the Myles Garrett stuff. Would they be better off sort of trading out of the 2 spot, adding a bunch of picks in the next 2-3 drafts to try to get themselves a quarterback of the future and rebuild that thing? I feel like there could be some teams at the top that want to trade. If that's the case, who are the teams that are trying to trade up to get those quarterbacks, or potentially get those maybe blue chip non-quarterbacks at the top of the draft? Because I don't know, my cynical mind, I start seeing these reports all come out of the same spot about the quarterbacks at number 1, and I think, the Titans are putting a little bit of a bat signal out there about, hey, we're going to draft the quarterback at number 1. You better come up and talk to us if you want one of these 2 quarterbacks, and we're not just going to mention one of them, we're going to mention both of them.
It's definitely heating up. And just to kind of pull back the curtain, what a lot of organizations are doing right now is post-Senior Bowl, they'll bring in, like as we speak, all their area scouts. Those area scouts don't come to Chicago, New York, whatever their home team is, all that often. There's only a couple times a year. Training camp, draft. This is one of them where you come in, you start not really building your board, but you start comparing notes and finalizing, all the football is in the books. It's just, testing ahead. And, what are you hearing at the Senior Bowl, blah, blah, blah. And then when the combine rolls around, like, at least from where I sit, I start to really get some news. Like that's 3 weeks away. I'll be there at the end of the month. The whole NFL's there. The Super Bowl's in the books. And then they go back and they start really building their boards, after pro days and things of that nature. So, coaches are starting to catch up, now that they've got some Senior Bowl stuff. And I'll be honest, I'm not super impressed with this draft overall, but I'm really not that impressed with the top of the draft. And a lot of that obviously is quarterback driven. We know 6 teams drafted one in the first round last year, and they're all out of the quarterback market. They all seem happy enough with their guy. But there's still a lot of musical chairs where quarterbacks need to fall. And there's only really 2 of them in this draft, as people know, that fit that bill. And in the end, I bet they get overdrafted. They always do, but no one's complaining that Jaden Daniels got overdrafted or may. We may look back at guys and say, okay, they were all right, but they're middle road starters, they're good.
Yeah. And that's the thing for these teams. It's like, oh, well, maybe Bryce Young did get overdrafted, but CJ Stroud didn't. Maybe Anthony Richardson did, but maybe another quarterback didn't. And so it's fascinating to see who loves who, which quarterbacks really. And clearly this process is not done. And if you are the Tennessee Titans or whatever team at the top of the draft, you've got to do all of your work. So there's a nugget of truth to any of these stories, because of course you're going to put in a bunch of work with all these guys. But I think there's some things conclusions we can start to draw here. And again, it's still early. There are players traditionally that were like, oh, second round pick, and they end up going in the top 10, right? From February to April, a lot can absolutely change. And there's players that are in the top 5 of mocks in February, then end up not going in the first round at all. So those things happen. So we don't know everything about what this draft class is going to look like. But I think based on everything we know so far, based on, some of the tape work I've started to do, and I'm granted late to the process on a lot of this stuff, but Cam Ward is clearly ahead of, 9 out of 10 boards ahead of Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah.
I think Ward is QB1, Sanders is QB2, and everyone's still trying to figure out who QB3 is, right? And then there might be some teams that don't have even Shedeur Sanders as a first round guy, don't have him as QB2 even. And then there's some other teams that might have Shedeur QB1 and Cam Ward QB2. But right now, I think it's safe to say consensus around the league is that Cam Ward is the top quarterback in the draft. Shedeur Sanders is second, and everyone's trying to figure out who number 3 is.
I think that's true. But to put it in context, I think if this version of Sanders would have came out last year, he would have been 6 or 7, probably fighting Knicks for that last spot, where Ward might have been 5th or 6th or 7th. None of them are Drake May, let alone Caleb Williams at this time. So what's that worth?
Which is to say, Bo Nix still went with the 11th, 12th pick in the draft, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's still a top 15 guy, even if that's where he is graded. And then if there's no 1 through 6 ahead of you, how high can you end up going? So even if it's not a super high-end quarterback class, that doesn't mean these guys aren't going to still all go in the top 15 of the draft, or even the top 4 of the draft potentially.
Because there's, even at other positions, the blue chippers aren't as blue as they usually are. It's not Penei Sewell versus Jamar Chase. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think the top of this draft is super high. And you mentioned Bryce Young before. I can't believe for any stretch of imagination Tennessee's just happy with Will Levis and going to roll with him. But I could see a Bryce. I bet they're hoping somebody falls in love with one of these quarterbacks, the Giants, the Raiders, the Jets, and offers them a Bryce Young-like package to get the 1.
And then they go the veteran route, give
Sam
Levis
Darnold
one more chance to compete.
Yeah.
And I could buy the same argument for both of the top 2 teams in the draft, even though you could easily plug in a quarterback to either the Titans or the Cleveland Browns. So that'll be fascinating there. And the question becomes, and I want to get to this next, Matt, are there the blue chippers? Who are the blue chippers, and who could change teams' plans to make them draft a player that is not a quarterback if they even are a quarterback needy team? We'll talk about those players next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson, brought to you by GameTime. GameTime is the place to find tickets and last-minute tickets. And if you're looking tickets for the next big event, maybe last-minute tickets for the big game this week, you can find those at GameTime as well. We're talking concerts, comedy shows, any sporting events. Find the right ticket at the right price, and sometimes that could be an absolute headache to find those tickets. And GameTime is the place. If you ever go to baseball games or football games or basketball games or concerts, you should have this app on your phone. GameTime is a phenomenal resource when you're buying tickets. And with GameTime Picks, a new feature, it's never been easier. So let me tell you how GameTime Picks works. GameTime Picks is a new feature on the app that allows you to curate the best deals. It does all the work for you, by the way, curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings, especially those, big concert venues, outdoor festivals, or sporting events where there's 60,000 plus seats potentially available. GameTime Picks does the work for you. The best part, you're covered. GameTime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. So go get some phenomenal deals, and especially last-minute deals on tickets with GameTime. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So the blue chippers, this is a class that has some depth to it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
There's some good players into the second and third round. And the top of the draft, though, this isn't going to be a 2021 class where there's, 5 quarterbacks, and then there's, Micah Parsons still sitting there at pick 12, and there's, superstar wide receivers up and down the first half of the first round. I don't think it's going to be that way. And we're talking about how there's 2 quarterbacks, and I think there's now 2 blue chip players that are clearly head and shoulders above the rest of the draft. And if you're doing a mock draft, essentially at this point, Matt, you have to have probably a quarterback, which becomes Cam Ward. Mm-hmm. If we're working off this idea, and we are correct about all of this that we're reading right now with the NFL draft, it's going to be Cam Ward in one of those 3 spots. It's going to be Travis Hunter in one of those 3 spots. The corner/wide receiver from Colorado, and Abdul Carter, Penn State edge rusher, is the other. Those 3 players have to go 1, 2, 3 in some order in any mock draft I'm putting together right now.
Yeah, I mean, unless somebody gets crazy with Sanders, which
right. Sanders,
just because quarterbacks can trump everything. But now, I would say they're
4 picks. But then, as we know, the team at 4, the New England Patriots, already has themselves a quarterback. So now that becomes the top 5-ish, right? And then you start figuring out 4 and 5, and who are the other 2 players at that point?
Yeah, I guess maybe how I'd frame it is, I don't think Hunter and Carter will last past 4. Like they're going to go in the top 4 some way, shape, or form. And to your point, probably top 3. And I look at those 2 as kind of the only 2 blue chippers, which isn't fair to Genty, because like Bijan, he's great at what he does, but he's not going to go in the top 5. So he's a blue chipper, but he's a running back, so we know that that's not going to be the same. But it's weird. I mean, again, I don't love the top of this draft. Like, I know you've probably done some O-line homework. I mean, the Niners are certainly linked to those guys. But like the top O-linemen in this draft, I'm not even sure they're tackles. Like they're not Jonathan Ogden. They're not, what's his face, Alt, that are just pure tackles at all. They might be guards. I mean,
almost every single offensive tackle prospect, the second line of the scouting report might be better at guard in the NFL, might be guard, might have to transition to guard, might be a Pro Bowl guard, but could be still a tackle, right? And the only guy at the top is Ohio State's Josh Simmons, that it's like, okay, clearly this guy's going to be a tackle and going to stay at tackle. He doesn't get the guard tag, but he's coming off a ACL, or it's not an ACL, it's a knee injury. It's patellar tendon.
Yeah.
And so he's maybe at best case going to be available for training camp. And so is he going to be the top offensive lineman on the board because he's the cleanest, offensive tackle prospect, and he's a really good prospect, but then he's got an injury thing going on. So it's like and Croc and I are going through trying to build our Locked On 49ers big board for the Niners. Niners have the 11th pick in the draft. And it's like, aside from Hunter and Abdul Carter, It's like, oh, well, maybe you could trade down 10 spots and get someone who's got the same exact grade. Like there's some good prospects there, but I can't, we haven't found the guys that were like, oh, we're pounding the table. I hope this guy could even slide to 11. There's hardly any of those players. So basically from pick 6 to pick 20, I don't know. They have the grade.
And it's a great point about the Ohio State tackle is maybe we come out of the combine and he is clean all across the board, and then you can't not see him in the top 5 of a mock because he's a tackle and all those things. If he can answer the question soon, maybe everyone on the planet will mock him to New England at 4 or something like that. Okay. I mean, obviously some things have not worked themselves out yet, but even Carter and Hunter, they're great. It's fine, but I don't think they're as good as Myles Garrett was coming out of A&M or Jamar Chase or, some of the studs you see that anyone could scout, let alone like where your Niners are picking, really isn't that much different from where my Steelers are picking at 21. I like Will Campbell at LSU, but some think he's a center. Like his greatest traits, he's smart
because he's super smart, and that's where a lot, even Ashton Genty, it's pretty important because if you want to put Ashton Genty as a draft prospect in the Bijan category, in the Jahmyr Gibbs category, because clearly the production is there and he's a phenomenal player, you put on the tape and you're like, wow, this guy's awesome, but he's still got to go to the combine and run 4.4 flat just to even that. If he goes to the combine and he's listed 5'9", 215, if he shows up and he's 5'8.5", 212 pounds and runs a 4.55, he might not go in the first round.
Right. Or if he lights it up, I'm sitting here looking at the top of the draft. What's the absolute highest he could go? Maybe Vegas at 6 because they're so bad at running back. I mean, if they get shut out on quarterbacks or sign Darnold or Russell Wilson or somebody like that, maybe they go there. But
I go to the Bears at 10 because, Ben Johnson might say, I want my Jahmyr Gibbs, and there's no Penei Sewell to talk me out of taking the Jahmyr Gibbs. He's like, well, what do you want for your offense? Well, I want a tackle for my quarterback. I want a playmaker. We've already got wide receivers on this team. So how about a playmaker at running back? I want one of those two things. Well, if there's no Penei Sewell, maybe there is his Jahmyr Gibbs. So maybe Ashton Genty at 10, but that's about as high as I could see him possibly going. You got the Cowboys at 12, but he would still have to, there's still work to do. Will Campbell still has to show up and prove that he's got enough arm length to stay at tackle. Genty still has to work out and run and be 5'9" and run in the 4.4s and hopefully even faster. And there's some aspect of his game where I can't tell, is he a 4.5 guy or is he a 4.3 guy? Because sometimes he just looks like he's running so easy, but he's also running away from everybody too. So I have no idea how someone like Ashton Genty is gonna work out. All of these pass rushers as well. What is the arm length there? What is the actual height and weight for some of these guys? Because there's a million defensive linemen and pass rushers in this class, but they're all different shapes, and the big guys don't have bend, and the bendy guys aren't big. And so, which teams are going to like which guys? And again, it's just like they all kind of have a similar grade, so you're just picking your flavor at this point with a lot of those guys. And by the way, like a third of the top 100 players might be one of these shapes and sizes of defensive linemen and pass rushers, because there's a ton of them, but aside from Abdul Carter, there's no consensus on who the best guys are.
Yeah, and that's, I would say one thing, and then that's kind of what I was to mention, is there are some impressive positions top to bottom, but even like Ted McMillan, great prospect, he's gonna go high, blah blah blah. But most drafts, he's probably the wide receiver 2 or 3. Like, was he a better, better than Garrett Wilson, who wasn't even the first receiver drafted? Probably not.
Yeah. So looking at some of these recent draft classes with Ted McMillan or Luther Burden, or kind of the consensus top 2 wide receivers, would either one of those guys go ahead of the top 3 receivers in some of these big time classes we've seen recently? They're
not going ahead of Neighbors or Harrison, that's for sure.
No. Or Odunze.
Right. You're probably wide receiver 4 or 5 most years.
I could buy the idea that Ted McMillan and Drake London,
maybe
first receiver in that class. He actually went, I think, 1 or 2 picks ahead of Garrett Wilson. I thought Garrett Wilson was a better prospect, and I liked Garrett Wilson a lot coming into that draft. But again, Mason Graham, defensive tackle, he might be the next guy that some people are talking blue chip, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if he falls even outside of the top 10. picks just because, is he going to blow up the combine? Is he going to be one of those freaks where people are like, oh, okay, yeah, he's the guy, even though the tape is good and he's a really good prospect? Is he going to have that sort of height, weight, speed that Carter and Hunter have? That
Williams and those types.
That's probably not going to be that level of prospect either. So he
seems safe, but he doesn't seem, I doubt he goes crazy in Indy. Like you said,
a team picking at 8 might sit there and say, man, I like Mason Graham, but guess what? Defensive tackles deep. We can probably get a really good one at the top of the second round. So let's go a different direction here.
Yeah, I did want to mention that. The receiver class isn't as strong at the top as we mentioned, or as deep as usual, but there's guys there as there always are. It's not barren. The running back class is ridiculously good. I mean, I heard Mel Kiper say, I have 35 guys with a draftable grade at running back, and it's strong at the top. It's deep. I mean, you'll get guys with 3rd round grades in the 5th round at running back. It's a really good tight end class. We could see 2 of those in the 1st round, and I really like the depth. Some Senior Bowl guys, I like the tight ends. The tight end's impressive. You mentioned the edge group, really good. I mean, it's deep. There's a lot to pick from in the top 2 days. Defensive tackle, really, really strong. So those are the positions of strength in this draft.
You mentioned Senior Bowl. Let's talk a little bit about the Senior Bowl risers potentially. I think there's 2 names of guys that I would have firmly right now in the 1st round, especially since we're trying to jockey for position and with some of the players with very similar grades out there potentially in the top, even 50 players. Mm-hmm. 2 guys that made a lot of money, I think, in Mobile, Alabama. And I got one more question for you about the 4th pick in the draft next.
Oh, okay.
Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by PrizePicks. The big game, it's almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. We're talking over 10 million members at PrizePicks and billions in winnings awarded. PrizePicks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. How simple is it at PrizePicks? It's easy. You're just playing against those stat projections at PrizePicks. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 player projections. And if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. The more you get right, the more you multiply those winnings. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard to win. So if you pick more than on 1 yard projection for Patrick Mahomes, all you need to do is pair that with 1 more correct pick, and you are already cashing out. And you can check out the promos tab as well to tail any of the super sweet Millie winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. So download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup at PrizePicks. Run your game. Before we get into the Senior Bowl stuff, I want to ask you a question about the New England Patriots. Mm-hmm. So we're and I've been kind of bouncing around this idea, trying to put together a mock draft and thinking about this. And I laid it out there earlier about the top 3 picks. So for me today, I think the blue chip guys at the top are better than the quarterback. So I'm going to have Abdul Carter 2 because the Browns are going to trade Myles Garrett potentially. And Travis Hunter, just with the combo of who he is, how good of a player he is, I think he's the best player in the draft. And it's hard to give extra credit for the 2 positions because I don't think he can play both full time, but he can give you some ability to play the other. Probably corner first, then wide receiver, but could go the other way. He's a special.
Maybe depends on landing spot of
right
what he majors in and what he minors in,
So he's a special dude, and if the Titans can trade out, maybe they still will trade out. Aside, without the opportunity of drafting one of those 3 guys in Cam Ward at quarterback. But right now I'm going to put Titans with Hunter and just draft the best player. He's a player in college football. He's the best player in the draft. 1. Abdul Carter 2 for the Browns to kickstart their new era of pass rusher there after trading Myles Garrett, and they could get picks in this draft, get picks in future drafts, and they could probably trade out a number 2 as well. And then Cam Ward, number 3, because the blue chippers are gone. Giants need a quarterback. They go QB. So
I think the Giants would love that. I think they want to draft a quarterback. Like they'd love to have 2 position players go off the board.
And I think the Cam Ward could have, I think the Zabel award, I think that could work, and it could be an interesting situation. They could still get fired after this, but if you
I wouldn't fight him on that pick at all.
Right. And so that's where my mock would be today. Hunter, Carter, Ward, 1, 2, 3. I don't know what you do at 4. You just best wide receiver, offensive lineman available.
My thoughts are you hope somebody's begging to move up for Sanders, even if that's just a couple spots, Raiders, Jets, somebody like that. That would be ideal. I think we have to mention New England's going to look a lot different then than now. They have so much cap space, but they still are going to have a bad roster, even if they are, great. If they had T. Higgins and Trey Smith and all the best players at their respective positions, they're still going to have needs. My hunch is if I were to pick who ends up going there, if Josh Simmons, the tackle from Ohio State, shows that he is healthy, maybe you just pencil him in there. I mean, he's a real left tackle. Left tackles in this draft are hard to come by. Or it seems early, but McMillan, the receiver. It's not perfect, but I would think it's one of those two positions.
Do you think Vrabel says, no, dude, I'm going to get the nastiest guy in the front 7. I'm going to draft like a Mason Graham. He's the best guy. We're going to draft him. We'll figure out the rest later. Yeah.
Especially if they've signed an O-lineman or 2 and a receiver.
And the reason I asked that, because I think as the process goes along, if I'm reading it correctly, we could start to have that sort of a consensus to where it's like, oh, the draft is going to start at 4, right? Like I feel like that's kind of the scenario that could come about, because if Ward goes 1, then it's still the 2 blue chippers at 2 and 3, right? And maybe you start talking about Shedeur at 3, but
maybe those top 3 are going in the top 3 in some order to some, maybe not even to these teams,
That's the vibe I get. And so the draft starts at 4. Let's get that started now as we sit here on February. I don't even know what date it is. February 5th here, pre-Super Bowl. The draft starts at 4. The New England Patriots are going to run this thing.
Very well could be. And again, I would think if you want one of those 3, you could probably get up there, though. Yes. I can't see the Giants trading away from a quarterback, but I could see someone trying to get ahead of the Giants for a quarterback.
And let's say the Titans fall in love with Cam Ward. I do think if
they're going to tell us they will.
That's true.
Lying season. Yeah.
They're going to put both quarterbacks probably. Yeah. If you want a quarterback, you could probably get the second quarterback. The trade is available for you. Who are the teams that are going to be willing to trade up? That could be a really fun thing, because if the options seem like they're going to be open, if you want a quarterback and you love one of those 2 guys, you can probably make that happen.
We had a lot of Browns talk earlier in the week surrounding Myles Garrett, but the more I dig into this, once he gets traded, I think their goal is going to be to win 0 games. Like they're just going to eat all the cap space they possibly can, maybe trade the Denzel Wards, and then get a quarterback next year, So I don't think they go quarterback. I think they're going to be maybe the worst team in the league.
Yeah, they should load up on picks for 2026, maybe even 2027, depending on which class is better. It's kind of hard to just not have a quarterback for multiple seasons. They're probably hoping the 2026 draft would be the class that is like the star-studded quarterback class. That would probably be the path if you're the Cleveland Browns, because what are you going to win without Myles Garrett? And he's been the anchor of what has been good for your team when you were competitive in recent years.
Because when you trade him, there's a bunch of dead cap stuff too. There's already all the Watson stuff. I just think you eat all that stuff this year and try to prep for next year, and maybe you run it back with Jameis Winston and he throws a bunch of picks or whatever,
And so is that player even there for teams that want to get all the way up to 1, 2, 4 potentially in the draft? Senior Bowl. Who are your favorite Senior Bowl guys? I got a couple of names of players that I think are firmly first round guys that people were talking about a few weeks ago.
I'm sorry. I thought you were going to give me your guys.
I'll give you mine first.
Go for it.
So I have 2 names, and number 1 is, and he had the highlight play of the week, was Mike Green. And the more I'm diving into Mike Green tape, and I've been talking about these defensive linemen and pass rushers, and there's some teams that might wait just because it's a deep class of defensive linemen. But if you want to talk about someone who is a block destroyer, who is an animal, who knows how to get to the quarterback, who's got, even though he's undersized, is a good run defender, has speed to power, it's Mike Green. And my comp for Mike Green is actually DeMarcus Ware. And Mike Green's not quite as, he doesn't have quite the length and the frame that DeMarcus Ware had. And DeMarcus Ware went to the combine and ended up running like 4.5s and had a 38-inch vertical. And he had longer arms than Mike Green, but they were very similar weight. And they were both super productive, smaller school guys that were late bloomers physically. Both started out as wide receivers is kind of what I'm getting at. DeMarcus Ware was a skinny wide receiver and just kept growing into a defensive end at the NFL level. And Mike Green similarly was a former wide receiver. You see his burst, you see his athleticism, but he also has a wrestling background too.
Yeah, he's not a finesse guy.
Yeah, and he's just an animal, and he was really good at the Senior Bowl. And as long as he can work out well, because that's sort of the tape is there. It doesn't matter if you came from a small school. It doesn't matter what school you came from, Matt. As long as you dominated your competition, which he did, led the nation in sacks, 17.5. You go to the Senior Bowl, you dominate there, which he did, and then you got to throw down at the combine. That is the trifecta, and you're going to go high. And he might not be a fit for everybody just because he's only 250 pounds, 6'3", 250, and it doesn't have long arms. But I mean, he's a beast off the edge, phenomenal against the pass and against the run. I wouldn't be shocked if he goes in the top 10 at this point. And then the other guy is Gray Zabel, who's now the best center in the class. He went from being like probably not going to stick a tackle to dominating all the reps inside and makes teams feel good. But there's actually a center worth drafting potentially late in the first round now.
Yeah, those are two great names, and you always look for the small school guys. I love the Ware shout out because he came out the year I was with the Browns and we had the 3rd overall pick and considered him. We just like Braylon Edwards a little better. I mean, it was a really good prospect too, and better prospect than player. Those are the two that definitely stand out. Zabel was phenomenal in one-on-ones. I mean, he's a left tackle at a small school. Probably he's Graham Barton. That type of dude where maybe he's a guard, probably the top center in the draft, but I think he goes in the 20s.
Any favorites for you? What stood out to you at the Senior Bowl?
A ton, but I don't know who would be firmed themselves in the first round except for those two. Like Jack Besh was the story of the Mobile. Unfortunately, his brother Tiger Besh was killed in New Orleans in that tragedy. But he was phenomenal. Darius Alexander from Toledo, I think, is now a 2nd rounder. Smaller school MAC dude. Orojo, the tight end from Miami, is definitely shooting up boards. I don't know if he can get in round 1, but I don't think he'll fall out of the top 50.
Big and athletic. I saw him, and I was like, nobody brought him up because it's not like he doesn't have traits either. He's got a little after the catch.
Oh, yeah.
250, can move. By the way, Jack Besh, future Los Angeles Ram, Jack Besh.
Oh yeah, he's going to be Cup's replacement.
Yeah, I mean, lock that in. We're talking about the top 3 picks in the draft. I don't know where the Rams are picking in around round 2, round 3. I don't know how high Besh is going to go, but it's on into the Los Angeles Rams.
The Senior Bowl was loaded though. I mean, Walter Nolan, Shamar Stewart, those guys were there and looked like first-round picks and are going to be first-round picks. They're from bigger schools, but. I could go deep into basically everybody from the Senior Bowl, but in terms of who turned into first rounders, I think you nailed the top 2 that, small school guys that had to prove it.
Of course, we'll have a lot more to go on the 2025 NFL draft, some other Senior Bowl guys, some combine guys coming up here in just a couple of weeks as we run through the offseason. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's time to focus, though, on Super Bowl 59. We've got our mailbag this week on Thursday. Then we'll make our official predictions for the Super Bowl, look at the final injury reports and all that on Friday's episode here. So get those questions in at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL. We're going to probably field some from the Super Bowl, but if you got draft questions or free agency trades, whatever it is, hit us at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL. Drop a question in the YouTube comments. Subscribe while you're there. Matt and I back tomorrow right here. Peacock and Williamson.